Kia ora, and welcome back to the Good Day Matrix. My name is Daz, and today I had the absolute privilege of talking to Dr. Angela Lim, who's the co-founder and CEO of Clearhead. Now, she is an innovator on a mission to ensure that there is equitable access to mental health for everybody in Aotearoa and beyond. She's an Edmund Hillary Fellow, she's a lecturer, and she's a board member. Today, we kōrero about her value of fairness and how it has shaped everything that she does in her life, right from being a little girl, and the importance of stepping back when you're not doing things that you know you need for your own well-being, and having a look at how you're feeling and seeing how it influences you when you're not doing the things that you need. Now, we do this interview online today. We really hope that you enjoy it. So thank you so much for your time today, Angela. We're really, really grateful. I know that you must have one heck of a busy schedule, so thank you very much.
Happy to chat.
We'll get straight into identity, and then we'll just weave our way through. So tell us about your whakapapa.
Yeah, sure. So my background is I grew up in Malaysia. I was born there and I studied in Singapore. I studied till I was 15 in Asia before I moved to New Zealand. We migrated as a family, migrated to Auckland, and have been there basically ever since. Yeah, so that's kind of sort of like our family journey so far.
That's so cool. And you said when we caught up that you kind of drifted a little bit until your early 20s. So talk to us about that transition point for you.
Yeah, I think that like most young people, it's a search to figure out like what it is that you're good at, what it is that you're interested in. Obviously, I run a company now called Clearhead, and we see a lot of data around people trying to find their purpose, and that continues to be the number one reason why someone's not in a good mental state if they feel not aligned in terms of their values, or not aligned in terms of what they want to do in their future. And so for me, it was a journey that really took 10 years before I got to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do with my life. So if I think back about the things that I really enjoyed, I was always fascinated by all the science subjects. So I remembered my parents like enrolled me in like astronomy camp. And that was super cool, looking at all the telescopes. I was always fascinated by the brain. I felt like there was a lot of potential there. I remembered that for a whole year I would exchange emails with another friend of mine, and we would just literally send each other pages long emails about quantum physics. And so this was when I was in my final year of high school. And then when I sort of got to university, my first degree was in biomedical science, specializing in neuroscience, because that was my what I was most fascinated about, like the brain. And then I also had a few psychology papers in there as well to kind of really round that bit out. I got to do lots of interesting research projects, that, for example, 15 years ago, it was groundbreaking then. Back then we thought that, when by the time you get to be an adult, your brain stops creating new brain cells. And we actually learned that that's not true. And one of my research projects that I looked at was around basically turning what they call differentiated cells, which is basically your skin cells, your corneal cells, and then turning them backwards into progenitor cells or stem cells. So that was kind of groundbreaking with what we did then. But I knew that I don't want to be stuck behind a laboratory. So I always knew I loved helping people. I was the kid that even in primary school, people came and asked me for advice that I somehow in all my young years was able to give. And so then I was like, well, everybody wants to get into medical school. And so I applied to that and I got in. And then when I got into medical school, I was kind of very disillusioned. I was like, this is not what I'm good at. And I felt very much like I wasn't sure whether I made the right decision. The first couple of years was really hard, especially because the first couple of years were my preclinical years, so I didn't get to interact with patients. And a lot of memorizing of knowledge, which was not really my strength.
Yeah.
And then I got to my clinical years and then I loved it. I love working with patients and helping them and, just sitting and holding space for people who are really vulnerable and needing that support. Then I kind of felt still that I really wasn't what I wanted in my life. I didn't just want to be a doctor. And I was really passionate about like sort of solving really complex problems at a systems level. And so after finishing medical school, training in pediatrics, working clinically in the hospital for a few years, I decided that it was time to it's now or never. And so 5 years ago, I started a company called Clearhead. I did it with my co-founder, Michael. He's a software engineer, and we basically use AI to improve access to mental health support. It's been an up and down journey. It's been very hard, harder than expected, I guess, when we first started out, but very much something that I know for sure this is my life's work. And I feel that this is where I can really make an impact, and I'm utilizing my skills and knowledge in a way that is unique to me and the problems I want to solve in the world. And I'm really excited about like the impact we can make. It's not been easy, but I think that's kind of where my journey's kind of gotten me to now.
It's amazing, and it's amazing the kind of resilience that it takes to be a founder. And it's underestimated by people who kind of look from the outside in, and they might see you 5 years down this track now and be like, oh, Clearhead, they've got it together. But actually the grind and the, all of that beginning stuff, the initial stuff where you can't get people's buy-in and you're working and you're having all these meetings and you're trying to do all these things, that resilience is just underrated. And I really applaud you for that, because it's something massive to just keep going and keep seeing the dream. And I think that's the thing, as long as you can keep that in front mirror and back mirror kind of thing. So when you're kind of like, am I doing the right thing? You are, because you're going to make such a change in so many people's lives if you just keep forward motion, no matter what that forward motion looks like at the time. Yeah. Well done. Awesome. So we'll move into body. And so with body, do you have any non-negotiable things that you do for your body, whether it's sleeping or eating or moving your body? Are there any things that you do to take care of you?
I wish I was more disciplined about them being non-negotiable. But what I do know makes me feel good is one, sleep. I need to kind of at least have 6 hours. And the second is exercise. Like I need to at least exercise at least twice a week, whether that's going for a run or doing like sort of like more body workouts.
Yeah.
And then for me, food is my love and my joy. And so being able to have good food with friends, whether that's trying out restaurants or going home to seeing my parents and getting home cooking, or just when I have time to cook for myself as well and host like friends over. So I think for me, it's very much sleep, exercise, and good food as sort of the three things that nourish my body.
That's so, it's like perfect. In terms of people, and all of us struggle to prioritize our body and just to prioritize, to be fair, ourselves most days. And there's so much on plates, and you would be no different. You've got a lot to get done. So do you have any advice for people around prioritizing their body, whether it is sleep or food or eating? But have you got any sort of tips or advice that you could give to them?
Yeah, I think the first thing is making sure you give yourself the space to kind of understand how you are when you don't do the things that you know are good for you.
Mm.
So as human beings, we're really only motivated to do things when we either want to get pleasure or we want to avoid pain. And so for some people, exercising gives them pleasure. So reminding yourself that if you haven't had your daily dose or your weekly dose of pleasure, doing the things that is important for you there. Or for example, if you know that like if you don't sleep well, your whole day is kind of unproductive, you snappy at people, your kids, your partner all frustrate you, then avoiding that by ensuring that you prioritize your sleep is really important. Like each individual person has things that is for them really gonna work.
Yeah.
And nobody can tell you that. You have to figure that out yourself. And then you have to kind of remind yourself of the moments in which, if you don't do the things that work for you, why that matters. And as long as you kind of regularly remind yourself of that and not drift more than a week or two, then I think that you get yourself into a really good habit about prioritizing what's important for your body.
Yeah. And it's self-awareness too, right? Often we're so busy we don't actually check in at all or know what works for us. So that's a great piece of advice, to actually stop and realize what it feels like when you're not doing those things. That's a fantastic piece of advice. Now with Clearhead, you must need to keep a lot of space in your brain for the visionary thinking that you do. So how do you create that space to really be able to see the future and be able to be curious and be creative and really see past where you are now to create this amazing app?
Yeah. I don't have any secret sauce other than to say that you just need time and space for like in time and space where you are able to have just yourself and your thoughts. So there's two components to that. One component is, do you create that time and space? So it's very easy that, especially during the week, that your schedule just gets filled up by meetings and you're just doing operational stuff. Especially in my context, we're still a small team in terms of like a huge need on our shoulders, but we don't necessarily have unlimited resources to hire lots of people. So I do definitely have a lot of my time filled with operational stuff. When I can, I try and bunch meetings so that I don't have like weeks that are great for me are weeks where I literally have 1 or 2 days where like there's no meetings on there. And then I can actually just focus on getting stuff done. Because, having lots of meetings that like just kind of breaks up your day kind of actually is, to me, not very, you can't get to a state of flow that you need with a lot of this strategic type of thinking. Having said that, like actually most of my thinking is done usually on the weekend where like there's no expectations on me to kind of be responding to people. No one's pinging me in meetings, sending me emails. So having those space is really important. And like I said, when I take the time to go for a run, I normally go for a run at least an hour in the weekend. And I don't take my phone with me, so it's just my thoughts and nature. And you'd be surprised how whatever's top of mind in terms of problem solving just floats to the top, and you can kind of think about what are the solutions you can put in place. And then I think the second is around like, if you are stuck on a strategic issue, like, taking the time to ask for advice or making time to actually say, okay, well, I want to work through this strategic problem. Putting that in your calendar, whether if it's for yourself or if you're going to get someone else in place to discuss it with you, just to kind of just take the first step. I think often people feel very daunted about these strategic problems and they feel like they have to have all the answers from the get-go, and that's not true. Most of the hard problems that we've solved took us years, and it's what one step unlocks the next step. So those are the two things I would advise in terms of like thinking about how to actually work on the business rather than in the business.
Yeah. Very cool. And now you do journaling. So talk to us sort of about how you approach journaling.
Yeah, I find that the mind can basically make you feel very overwhelmed with things if you are juggling a lot on your plate. And actually, if you take the time to sit down and write it all down, you realize it's really not as bad as you think. And so, and it's also in the act of writing, it uses a different part of your brain, which actually then actually helps you synthesize and consolidate what you're thinking about. So it's really important in that context to kind of just make sure, you're really taking the time to create again space in which you can journal. I probably want to journal more than I actually have time to. And sometimes it's also just like having the space to kind of like rant about whatever shitty stuff that happened in your day.
Yeah.
And that's also okay because I think sometimes we censor ourselves socially that there might be things that we're thinking about that might not be socially acceptable to say, but we still think it. And so I think giving yourself the space to kind of let it out is also really helpful.
Yeah, and there's a book by Dr. Shafali I started reading a while ago. It's called The Radical Awakening, and she talks about that as well. There's so much pressure we actually put on ourselves, and whether it's the Instagram or, whatever it is that we see, but there's almost like this unconscious competition against other people to be living well or be doing different things. And if they can make the sandwiches look like this, I need to do that as well, and I need to have flash food and all this different stuff. But we also don't have conversations to say when it's hard, and we only show really the good bits. And so exactly what you're saying, it's how do we start to, as a social norm, start to have those conversations outside of our journals as well, because it'd be so great if those pressures could come off us every single day.
Yeah, and it's something that I ensure that I really do, because I think due to the position that I have and what we've achieved, I've been lucky enough to have a platform in which people have given us space to share about what we do. And I always make time to tell the reality, because I know that on the outside, it might look exactly as you said, like we've achieved all these amazing things and that we are now free of concern and problems. That's not true. Same thing with me as a person. I might do all these things that will help me stay mentally well, but doesn't mean that I don't go through the ups and downs of life. And I think that it's really important that whoever is listening know that they're not alone if they're struggling, that even people who look like they won't be struggling are struggling. And I actually really love this comic called Trevor Noah, and he runs this, he used to be the host of this show called The Daily Show. And he talked about how he basically shared with his team that he gets depression, and that he said, sometimes you'll not see me arrive on time in the morning because sometimes I just don't have the will to get up. And you see this person who is so intelligent and has so much success in his life, and here he is just really transparently saying that, like, that there are moments where his mental health will kind of impede how he can show up daily. And people are like, oh, but you're always laughing and smiling. And he's like, I'm not unhappy. I'm not sad. But I have depression. And so I think it's just recognizing that, like, for some people, even the ones that we consider really successful, we all have our own things that we're dealing with, and just to be compassionate is super important.
Yeah, and be in touch with it too. Pay attention. Don't just sort of carry on in your daily life and miss those cues from other people. Really, really important. With your team, you guys censor check assumptions, and I really loved it when you talked to me about that. So talk to us about how you censor check assumptions, and have there been any sort of troubles with giving or receiving feedback around that?
Yeah, I think that the human brain has cognitive bias. That means that sometimes we want to pick solutions that sound intuitively right or simple. And that's why we, love conspiracy theories, because they kind of connect the dots in a way that our very uncertain and complex world can't. And so often when we're trying to solve problems that actually are challenging, or that there is no clear answer to, and that maybe we're breaking new ground in terms of innovation, it's really important that if we make assumptions that we check them. So it's okay completely if you're saying like, okay, I think that users like to do X, and therefore we will make all these changes. You can kind of start that path, but be very clear around, well, how do you know that your assumption is correct? Like, what will you measure throughout the process that allows you to kind of validate before you kind of spend, like a whole year and like 5 people's time on it? So I think the most important thing is just that when you set a goal, or when you try to solve a problem and you come up with a solution, you're very clear around what are the assumptions there? How will you measure that those assumptions are correct? And then actually regular cadence, actually then measure, and then put time in which you then actually you review that data and then say, okay, is the data going the direction that I expect it to? And if yes, let's continue. If no, then maybe we should pause and then ask ourselves, like, why is this happening?
Yeah, and understand those T intersections, when you've got decisions to make of stop goes. Yeah. So community, when we talk about communities, we talk about anything from knitting groups to work to family to rugby clubs and everything in between. And you said that you really found your tribe when you joined the Asia New Zealand Foundation. So talk to us about some of the work that they do there.
Yeah, I would consider myself a weird person that liked a lot of very eclectic things. And I remembered that when I was in high school, it was really hard because like a lot of the external validation was around how popular you are, who are you dating, what parties are you going to. Those were never things that I place huge importance in my life. But at the same time, sort of the other extreme, which is like, what's your grades that you're getting, and what are you studying, and all that kind of stuff also wasn't something that kind of floated my boat. So I was someone who needed intellectual stimulation, social impact, creativity, all of those things in the context of like doing good. And it was really hard to find people in my life that had also saw the world in that perspective. So then when I was in university, I joined a group called the Asia New Zealand Foundation. And yeah, it was amazing. I met a lot of those people who loved the intersection of the social sciences and the hard sciences, and business people, politics. But at the same time, we are also all good to just have a laugh and go out for dinner. So that was the tribe that took me till my early 20s before I found, but then was incredibly empowering to not feel alone about the things I wanted to do in my life. And be able to know that in our own different ways, we can really achieve that.
Yeah. It's amazing when you walk into an environment and you can meaningfully contribute to that group, but also just feel valuable within there and feel that there's all those true connections, sort of, rather than trying to be, square peg round hole kind of thing and sort of fit into somewhere so you can fit in. But when we take that away and don't worry and just be our authentic selves, like how powerful that is to be in those spaces and just live as you are and be loved because of it and not have to be anybody different. It's massive for mental health. It's so massive and so under talked about, I think, still with right from our youth right through.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And a sense of belonging is a key part of that hierarchy. And when you are able to, each time you unlock a part of that hierarchy, it gives you the mental capacity to unlock the next one.
Yeah. And to ultimately get to the top and thrive and just
self-actualize.
Just live a wonderful life. Now with your Clearhead team, talk to us about how you guys have built your community, both probably within there and with your external community that you work with.
And I sort of talked about how hard it is to run the business. But the number one thing that keeps me going is the team that we've built. Each and every individual is so unique, but so passionate about the mission, which is to kind of improve access to mental health support. And we also don't take ourselves too seriously. I think that we deal in a very heavy subject area, including people who commit suicide. And I think if we allow ourselves to think about all the times in which these things happen, I think you can get very demoralized. So we find ourselves a good balance between like being motivated by the huge problem and the solution that we can bring to make an impact on solving those problems. And also celebrating the wins when we know, for example, that like this person who would otherwise not get help in any other way but through Clearhead did, or if someone told us that they were thinking of committing suicide and because of the support we provided them they didn't, just reminding ourselves of the good that we create in society. But I think what is also super motivating is knowing that even with such a small team we can solve these problems that we hear about from other companies who are maybe 10 times bigger or 10 times more funded, or like the government, which has like lots more, millions of dollars and hundreds of people, and we achieve outcomes that they don't. Reminds me of like being as part of like a Navy SEAL that, just a good bunch of people who have been able to kind of really unlock skills and knowledge. And there's something very motivating about that. And so that for me is like my community that make sure that I get up out of bed every morning and do what we do. We also are very committed to sort of like being a meaningful player in the ecosystem. So, we very much, when we first built Clearhead, wanted to understand where were the gaps. We were not interested in reinventing the wheel. And so for us, it was just very much, building a much more what we call co-design approach to the solution. So we talked to hundreds of like patients who like previously didn't get the mental health support that they needed. We talked to patients who did. We talked to clinicians who delivered that care. We talked to charities who were the stopgap. We talked to government payers. We talked to insurance companies. We talked to employers. We talked to a whole bunch of people that helped us deeply understand like where were the gaps, what were the problems, where could we innovate. And of course, we did all of this back in 2018 when like mental health was not a thing. And so I think we built a lot of goodwill in the community in that context because we really started from a place of like, we actually just want to solve the problem. It's not about the hype. It's not about the money. We did it before any of those things existed.
Yeah. And people don't forget those things, and we were just talking about this actually this morning around our youth mental health and some support that's been removed and how can we start to help, because crime is rising and all these things are happening, but support's being taken away as well. And so of course those things are going to start to increase because there's pressure on them and they're not coping, and things start, different influences start to get involved as well. And so how do we all become part of the solution for that, not for any other reason, but to help these kids, these youth, these rangatahi live, valuable lives where they feel like they can contribute meaningfully, like we talked about before, without the societal pressures or the judgments that are coming. And the work that you're doing is stunning towards that, and hopefully all these pieces of the puzzle can come together and really make a meaningful difference.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your kind words.
No, thank you. Now, we often talk about values, and we always talk about what values we all have, and a lot of people can list lots of different things, and some people can't remember the first value that they have that is their sort of non-negotiable. So do you have any non-negotiable values that doesn't matter if you're at home or at work, that in any environment, in any meeting you're in, those are the values that you hold really strong?
If I think about like what has determined my life, in terms of a lot of the decisions that I've made, both for myself individually as well as the things that I've committed to, like fairness is the number one thing that like has determined that. I remember being a kid and like basically getting really upset with my mom whenever I think she's telling me to do something that I don't think it's fair. And that hasn't changed. I think I still drive a lot of where I spend my energy on time tackling things that I see as unfair about the world. And in the context of health, there are a lot of health inequities. People who most need support don't get it. And I think what makes me really not get disillusioned by all of this is to kind of think about, well, then how am I going to solve the problem that I see in the world? How can I be part of that solution, as you said? And so, for example, when we think about ensuring that people who need help gets it, not only when we design solutions for Clearhead where it's the employer that pays, we also work with, for example, organizations that catches the people who don't are not in a position to be employed. So for example, we work with the Ministry of Social Development. So those who are unemployed, and mental health is a part of why they are unemployed or cannot get back into work, they can get very timely access to mental health support. And often, again, when we think about who make up those unemployed beneficiaries, a larger proportion are those of Māori and Pacifica background, where they are also disproportionately affected in terms of mental health challenges. And then they are also less likely to get that support through our existing system. And when our existing public therapy wait list is 6 months, then for a lot of people, that's too late. And so we have very high youth statistics where it's Māori male that are at the top of the leaderboard, and that's a leaderboard you don't want to be on. And so through working with Ministry of Social Development, these unemployed beneficiaries get that support in a timely manner, especially out in the regions where the access to healthcare is even harder. And what we've seen with multiple case studies now is just something as simple as 3 therapy sessions could take someone who's homeless and unemployed to becoming employed and having a home. These are incredible savings to us as taxpayers, but that's not even accounting the mental and sort of psychological support and sort of mental state the individual then gets into that allows them to then have a positive ripple effects to their community, whether that's their family or their friends or their people that they interact with. And so, yeah, I think for me, everything that I do has been driven by like, how can I make the world slightly fairer? And whether that's in the context of what I do for myself or what I do in terms of the work I do through Clearhead.
Amazing. And it sounds like you're a person who's really aware of the fact that if someone's not in the room, they still have a voice. And so you're speaking, with, I suppose, those unchecked assumptions, right? You're checking every assumption, and you're making sure that if you're sitting in a room, that though those people may not be sitting in there with you, that they have a voice, they're being heard in those spaces, and you're doing that work to ensure they're there, and people aren't, we're not making decisions for them or, building things that we just assume is going to be great for them, but actually we're checking that, and we're making sure, and you're making sure what you're doing is actually going to be helpful when you've had those conversations, and not just being like, hey, I've got a solution for you guys, here you go.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So we have some quick fire questions for you to finish us off for the day, Angela. What is a journal prompt you'd suggest other people use?
Oh, a journal prompt. What do you mean by that?
Like a question they could think about today when after they watch
gotcha.
this, might be something that prompts them to do their journaling today.
Yeah, look, I think it's very good to practice gratitude. So just something as simple as like, what's one thing that was positive about your day? Getting them to reflect on that.
What are 3 of your favorite books?
And I at the moment am reading a lot more business books.
Yeah.
But in the context of that, there are a few books that I really think are amazing. One is Good to Great by Jim Collins. One is 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. And then the third one is The Hard Things About Hard Things, I think, by Ben Horowitz.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a great book list. I'm going to add a couple of those. What is one piece of advice you'd give to someone who's struggling mentally right now?
Just ask for help. You're not alone and you don't have to stay in the space. So there are lots of help available, and Clearhead is one of them. So hopefully we can support.
Nice. What's your go-to pick-me-up song?
It depends on my mood, but I like Bam Bam by Camila Cabello at the moment.
Nice. Got a bit of sass. I like it. What was your first job?
I was a I worked at a Porter's in the fast food fast food chain. Yeah.
So cool.
I was like front of counter, I think.
Customer service, there you go.
Yeah, that's right.
If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Oh, teleportation. I'd love to just port myself anywhere in the world and just, it would be so amazing if I could travel and see more of the world more easily.
That's a great one. I haven't heard someone say that yet. That's a great one. What is your favorite board game?
I like Settlers of Catan.
Yeah,
that's pretty fun when you it's a bit of strategy, and I'm a bit competitive as well.
I think all of us are. That competitive streak has to be somewhere in all of us, I reckon. And last one, what are some qualities that you love about yourself?
I like that I care about things. I like that I'm not afraid to be honest, even though sometimes it's not like easy to be honest. But I also think that a lot of the hard things that need to be said in the world is not said, and so I think it's important that there are people who will say it.
Amazing. And it role models to others that it's safe to do the same thing. So that's a massive thing that you're doing as a leader as well. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been such an awesome interview, Angela, and I know that people listening to this, there are so many nuggets. My particular one that I loved today was how you were sharing about, that we're competing against each other, or we're worrying about all these external things, and actually we don't need to be doing that. We need to focus on ourselves and know what works for us. Know, whether it's body or mind or being outside or whatever that is. Don't think just because everyone else is doing it, that's the thing to do, but trusting that you can figure that out and make space for yourself to figure that out, which is amazing. So thank you so much, and we will see everyone next time. Ka kite.
Thanks for having me. Bye.